From 1878 to 1968, there were 71 lake captains that called Bay View, Wisconsin, on the shore of Lake Michigan, their home. While they lived here, they captained 195 different ships, from tugboats to schooners to steamships, in voyages that took them to every one of the Great Lakes. Join us now for another episode of Bay View, Town of Lake Captains, where we explore not only these captains, but also their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes.
Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bay View, Town of Lake Captains, brought to you by the historical Bay View Lake Captains Society. Today, I am standing in the front of Captain Charles Morbeck's house. Charles is especially unique among Bay View Lake Captains, if not all captains in the state of Wisconsin, in that he sank aboard 2 different Christmas tree ships. That's right, bringing back Christmas trees to Bay View, and he survived. That happened for one of those ships when he lived in the house behind me. Extremely interesting, Charles Morbeck. I think you'll enjoy it. That is the narration coming. Very unique, Charles Morbeck, Captain Charles Morbeck. Thank you for watching today's program. If you'd like to contribute to our society, who is attempting to put a plaque with all the captains' names on it up on East Lincoln Avenue, which was the highest concentration of lake captains in most, in fact, the most Bay View lake captains in all of Bay View lived on East Lincoln Avenue. If you'd like to contribute, see the directions at the end of this program. We also have a website. And you can also buy a book, which we're putting out volume by volume, containing the captains, and one is available for sale right now on Amazon. Provides more details and all the footnotes, among other things. So that's available to you too. And if you're out walking, you can also access our interactive website, which will take you around street by street and show you where all the houses are. These are free self-guided walking tours using only your phone. So lots going on. Happy to see you again, and we'll see you next time. And remember, hats off to our Bay View Lake Captains. Bye-bye.
Welcome to another installment of Bay View, Town of Lake Captains. where we discuss the lives of the 71 different lake captains that once lived in Bay View, Wisconsin, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, in the age of sail and steam. This discussion will include their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes. Here is the map of lake captains' homes in Bay View to show you where this episode takes place. Its location focuses primarily on the large green arrow. Today we will be discussing the life of Captain Charles E. Morbeck, who lived on Burrell and Clarence Streets in Bay View. He, like so many others you will learn about on this channel, had some amazing sailing adventures out on the Great Lakes. Captain Morbeck's most significant experience was that he had the distinction of captaining one Christmas tree ship and crewing another during his career. These famous ships would each year bring back freshly cut trees from the forests of northern Wisconsin and Michigan to Milwaukee and Bay View in time for the holiday. Both of Charles Morbeck's Christmas tree ships sank in storms. What's also very interesting is that the second one that sank, while he lived on Burrell Street, went under the waves with not just the trees aboard. It also was sailing with two future Bay View lake captains aboard, Charles and his brother Rudolph, who were also thrown into the water. In addition, Bay View lake captain Hans Hansen, captain and owner of the ship, joined Charles and Rudolph in the rough seas. Incredibly, not only did all three lake captains survive, the ship was subsequently raised, and they sailed it again just a few months later. Captain Charles Morbeck is the only lake captain documented in Wisconsin maritime history to have been aboard two different Christmas tree ships that sunk, one as a captain, the other as a crewman. Charles Morbeck was born in Sweden in November 1862. He immigrated to the U.S. in 1885 with his younger brother Rudolph, who would also become a Bay View lake captain. Charles went by his middle name Emil, and is sometimes seen in history under the name of Carl. Charles's initial whereabouts after immigrating, while not specifically known, was most likely Milwaukee, due to his connection with three different Milwaukee schooners. The first was the Vernie M. Blake in 1889, that he both co-owned and likely co-captained with younger brother Rudolph. The second, a Christmas tree ship, was the schooner Southside, from 1893 to 94, where he again was both owner and captain. And the third, the schooner Minnehaha, from 1890 to 97. Charles and Rudolph lost the Minnehaha when it was foreclosed upon in August 1897 to satisfy a personal loan of $135 they had defaulted on, the Minnehaha having been used as collateral. Charles's residences during this time aren't documented, but at the very end of it, in 1897, he is shown working in the 3rd Ward, working as a, quote, sailor, unquote. Lake captains were documented many times, using terms like sailor, seaman, and pilot, when they were actually working as captains. It's important to note that for both schooners Vernie M. Blake and the Minnehaha, brothers Charles and Rudolph were likely taking turns as captain. This would continue for all of their time together. In September 1897, Charles is found living in Newport, Wisconsin, and listed as a captain. After losing the Minnehaha to foreclosure on 17th of August 1897, Captain Charles Morbeck is officially documented living in Bay View for the first time over the next 2 years, 1898 to 99, at 106 East Clarence Street, and working as a, quote, lake captain, unquote, 1898, and, quote, captain, unquote, 1899. His ship was likely the three-masted schooner Vermont. Then, the next year, in 1900, he is shown living at 2 more places in Bay View. The first, in June of 1900, was actually living aboard the schooner Vermont that was tied up to the Kinnickinnic River wharf. Living there with him were both his brother Rudolph, as well as a fellow Bay View lake captain, Hansen. All three appear to have taken turns, alternating as owner and captain of the schooner. Charles Morbeck's third and final Bay View residence was at 2456 Burrell Street, through at least June 1901, and probably all of 1901. His occupation is listed as sailor. His ship here was also again the schooner Vermont. Southside and Vermont sank while carrying Christmas trees while he was aboard, and both were en route with trees to Milwaukee and Bay View. These sinkings are also the most of any single lake captain in Wisconsin history. The news accounts of both of these sinkings are amazing. It actually wasn't at all unusual for the time to have lake captains' ships sink during storms. This includes Bay View's lake captains, some of whom, like Charles Morbeck, survived multiple sinkings. These will be identified and discussed in future episodes, as we continue our discussion of Bay View's 71 different lake captains. But for Captain Charles Morbeck, we'll begin with the story of the sinking of his schooner Southside, published in the St. Paul Daily News and the Daily Inter-Ocean in December 1893, before he came to live in Bay View. The crew of the little schooner Southside were rescued last night by a lumber company's tug from this port of Anapay, Wisconsin, while trying to enter the harbour in their yawl boat through heavy ice. The Southside was bound to Milwaukee with a cargo of cedar posts and Christmas trees. When off Bailey's harbour, she began to leak, and efforts of the crew at the pumps were not sufficient to keep the water down. Soon the little boat was filled, but being loaded with wood did not sink, and rolled helplessly in the heavy sea. The ice rapidly accumulated on the deck, and the crew were forced to take to the one yawl boat. They had drifted by this time, so that they were opposite this port. They rowed toward the harbour light, but soon encountered the ice pack and were unable to proceed further. A lumber company's tug from Manistee was in port, and, hearing the calls from the imperilled men, at once went to their relief. The men were nearly exhausted, and were only taken aboard the tug with the utmost difficulty. The Southside is owned by Charles Morbeck, who sailed her, and Sturgeon Bay people. The cargo is owned by Theodore Plathner of Milwaukee. Both boat and cargo will be a total loss. Also of interest in this story is that the week before the sinking, the crew of the Southside spent the entire time cutting down the trees themselves on Washington Island. Next up is the story of the sinking of the Vermont, with 3 Bay View lake captains aboard: Charles Morbeck, his brother Rudolph, and Hansen. It occurred when Charles lived in Bay View at 2456 South Burrell Street. Its sinking is summarized here in our own words from documents provided in the C. Patrick Labadie collection held at the Alpena Public Library in Michigan, combined with our own research into the 3 captains mentioned above. In November 1900, the schooner Vermont sank in a storm at Big Bay de Noc, 80 miles northeast of Green Bay, on the southwest corner of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, bound for Milwaukee with a cargo of Christmas trees. None of the crew, including brother Rudolph Morbeck, who, along with Charles, were alternating crew and captain with owner Hansen at the time, were reported injured. The ship was subsequently raised and returned to service. Sometime after 1900, probably after the sailing season ended in December 1901, Charles Morbeck moved his family to Muskegon, directly across Lake Michigan from Bay View, for unknown reasons. Not long thereafter, he left Bay View to go over to Muskegon to join them. New to the state of Michigan and the people in Muskegon's maritime community, Charles took a first mate's job to get a start there, serving aboard the schooner Tenny and Laura. In August 1903, the Tenny and Laura sank in a storm off Port Washington, Wisconsin. This marks the third ship that sank while Charles Morbeck was aboard. He survived the first two sinkings, but not this time. Charles Morbeck went down with the Tenny and Laura and was drowned. He was 41 years old, and his body was never found. Charles Morbeck married wife Johanna, born in Prussia, in 1894. They had 3 children, 2 daughters, Frida and Hattie, and 1 son, Arthur. After Charles's death aboard the Tenny and Laura when it sank, wife Johanna and the children continued on. Johanna later took a job in 1926 as a laundress at Muskegon's Occidental Hotel, then in 1928 to 34 as a maid at the YMCA. She never remarried. Daughters Frida and Hattie both later married, and all of the children and Johanna lived the rest of their lives in Muskegon. In 1930, age 60, Johanna moved in with daughter Frida and her husband and child. Johanna died in 1938, age 68, and is buried in Muskegon. There are 2 other graves in the plot, of children, most certainly losses of Charles's son Arthur after he married. One of the graves is for Phyllis E. Morbeck, died 1922, age not listed. The other is for the 2-year-old boy, Charles E. Morbeck, 1925 to 27. Arthur had named his son after his father. Thanks for watching. This photograph isn't about Bay View or its lake captains, but it's from the same era of Great Lakes maritime history. We thought we'd close with it for enjoyment, as it captures the spirit of the era. In addition, this channel and its matching website also plan to support various maritime history projects related to Bay View's lake captains. One of these is a plaque and marker with the captains' names and addresses on it, as part of the creation of the Bay View Lake Captains Historic District, which will be the first of its kind in America. If you would like to donate to support these projects, to include this and other markers honouring Bay View's lake captains, with 100% of all donations and contributions in all forms going to support them, please consider donating to us through the listings shown next. If, for some reason, we are unable to secure these markers, then all funds donated to this site will be given as a cash donation to the museum ship SS City of Milwaukee in Manistee, Michigan. That is the only surviving intact ship once captained by at least 2 and likely 3 different Bay View lake captains. I'm Simon Stanhope, narrator for these episodes. Join us again soon for the next chapter of Bay View, Town of Lake Captains.